Hello and welcome back to the channel. And today's video is going to be the start of the new series, which is becoming foster parents. So we're going to start at the beginning, and the first step of that is the classes. So every area is going to be slightly different depending on your rules and regulations and also the type of agency that you go with. Here in Massachusetts, we went with DCF, which is the Department of Children and Families, and they have what is referred to as the MAP class. So you'll end up getting a curriculum, which is 2 books, and I'm sure it's slightly different than this one, but it essentially goes through all the different information that you're going to learn in the class. And then this is also kind of your review as you learn different things, specifically about trauma, working with bio parents, working with other foster parents, working with the department itself, so you have your social workers, you have the foster care liaison, you have the supervisor that oversees those two. And then if your case goes to adoption, you'll end up having an adoption worker. So classes are either 12 weeks or 6 weeks. Now, again, it's going to vary depending on your area, but this is kind of, based on the research that I've done as well as our local area. You either have nightly 12-week classes or you have Saturday 6-week. So my wife and I took the 6-week course because it's done a lot quicker. It's a longer day, so it's basically from morning till evening or just before evening. But in our case, they had snacks, and it was a great kind of, place to hang out with when you're not learning. And you also, it's really cool because you get to meet other, future foster parents that you may in fact end up working with. So while you're in class, an additional thing that's going to be happening is a home study. Now, this is actually done twice. There's the initial where they come out and they interview you, and if you're doing it with a spouse, they interview them as well. They'll then split you up either at the same time or at a different visit, and they'll interview you each separately. So the reason they do a one-on-one visit is to, of course, learn more about you, but also to kind of hang out with you at a more personal level. They ask you a whole bunch of questions on your backstory, the reason why you want to become a foster parent, how you were raised, a little bit about your family. And, it kind of feels like an interrogation, I'm going to be honest. It's really not. What they want to do is they want to make sure that you're doing this for the right reasons. And they also want to kind of learn who you are as a person. Because, it takes a certain kind of person to want to be foster parents, and it takes a certain kind of person to be good foster parents. So some of the questions that they ask you will be very personal in nature. And I guess that's kind of just goes with, the whole topic of they want to get to know you. The conversations with you and your spouse together are more about your daily routine, who will be taking care of the children. So if you have younger children, who will be doing drop off and pick up at daycare? Will you use daycare? Those sorts of things, because they also want to get an idea of, when they have children in care, they're going to ask you your age range. They're going to ask you if you have a gender preference. And that's really it. They don't get into details about ethnicity and such, as that would be extremely discriminatory and wrong. So, they really just want to make sure that the birth order is correct in your house, which for those who don't know is if you have another child already in your house, be it an adoptive or bio child, they want to make sure that you're aware that if you bring an older child into the house, it could really affect your child. And sometimes it's okay, it doesn't matter. I'll actually share a story in a future video on how we went against the birth order and what ended up happening as a result of it. So it is something to really pay attention to and decide if, that's something that you want to do. And then, of course, that'll be one of the questions on your application. So a few elements that I really enjoy about the class is, like I said before, meeting the different team members that you're going to end up working with. But also you get to meet, we'll call them veteran foster parents. So in our particular case, we actually had a mom who had actually ended up adopting 6 children. And I believe she had fostered over a dozen. And the reason she hadn't done more is simply just because they've been a fit for her family and she's adopted them. Which, of course, as you have more children in your home, it reduces how many children you can have from the foster program based on the number of bedrooms and the genders of the children that are already in your home. So one big thing that the course is going to touch on, and I'll be honest, if you've come from a background that has really not had a lot of stories or a lot of trauma or experiences that you weren't even aware of, it can be really hard to listen to because some of the stories that they're going to tell you and some of the situations that they're going to talk about, it's disheartening to even imagine that a child has gone through this. Now that we've been foster parents for over 2 years, we've firsthand met and fostered children that have been in some of these different categories. And it breaks your heart for various reasons. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to help the children regardless. But if you have a child that comes to you with advanced trauma, it is very difficult because you don't know, if you do something, is it going to trigger them? And it becomes a much more complex topic. And fortunately, there are different groups that can help you with this and different services that can help you along. But going back to the course, they're going to go in deep into these different details. We watched some videos on it. We read some different stories. The foster parent who was invited in gave us specific stories from their side. Now, for the most part, if you're not aware, everything about fostering is private, right? You can't post the children online. You can't post information about the stories. You can't post information about your specific case. You really can't tell people that aren't foster parents. And that's for the privacy of the children as well as the foster parents, as well as the agency as a whole. It's kind of nice where you have this class. They really kind of, they go behind the curtain. They tell you what's happening. In this case, she actually told us some real cases because at the end of the day, they have lived it, so they can kind of talk about it. So the course wraps up. There isn't really a test per se. I mean, they're mostly just judging your character, right? They want to see, do you show up? Do you engage? Do you ask insightful questions? Do you seem to be like a risk? I mean, I don't really know what would cause them to think that, but I'm sure there's something that they're looking for. And at the end of the day, they want to make sure that you're honest, you're doing it for the right reasons, and that you're going to be a good foster home. Because we all hear the stories in the news of bad foster homes, and the agencies obviously are sensitive to that for the children's sake, but also for their own image. I mean, at the end of the day, they stay in operation by successfully helping children. So they want to make sure that they're picking the right people to really help. Now, the timelines of 6 weeks, 12 weeks, the home study, and then your final review, they're going to vary wildly depending on your agency, depending on their caseload. I mean, all sorts of different things. So it's kind of like, there's actually a funny thing about one thing that happens when a child is removed is a 72-hour hearing. Now, in the real world, it never happens after 72 hours. It sometimes can be up to a week. But it's called that because it's supposed to happen 72 hours after the child's removed from, whatever situation they were in. Obviously courts are busy. There's a lot going on, and it just kind of happens that way. So your home studies and your final review and your approval and your final certificate, you'll actually be a registered foster parent or foster parents, you're doing it with your spouse. It can take a little while after the class, and you kind of just got to go with it. And the last step of the course is becoming official foster parents. So, your home study's gone through, you've gone through the class, everything's all set. Really, you're waiting for your phone to ring for the first child. And it's funny because in class they tell you it could happen as soon as an hour after you're officially registered. It could be a couple weeks later. In our case, I think it was about 3 weeks before we got our first call. But we also have a very specific age range to protect our birth child. So, it all depends on what you're willing to take. As crazy as it is, younger children, there's more homes for them. Older children, teenagers, preteens, there aren't because there's a few reasons. Some, they have younger children in the house already, and it goes back to the concern element. And then the other is people really don't know how to parent an older child, like say a 13 or 14-year-old or even a 16-year-old, and they're scared. And honestly, I'm scared because we don't have a teenager yet. But if the opportunity arose, it's something that my wife and I would talk about. And if we were able to help that child, which I truly believe that anyone can, then we would go ahead through and, take that child in. One final thing that I'll add is when you get the call from a placement, don't be afraid to say no. Now, I know it sounds heartless in a way, right? Because you're saying no to a child. There are other foster parents that may be a better fit. Or let's say that there's a reason why you don't think you can take care of that child to the best of your abilities. Don't cause more trauma and anguish for that child to temporarily take them in and then have them removed from your house to go to another home. So it's not being heartless. You just have to be true to yourself and to your spouse. Is this something that we want to undertake? At the same time, don't be afraid of every situation. So when we started out, we had a rule that we were going to take one foster child at a time just because we're new to this whole thing and we wanted to make sure that we were giving that child the best life that we could. And we felt that having two children at the same time would be rather difficult. And as it happens, our very first placement was two children. We had kind of our, we'll say, rules, but it kind of got thrown out the window when we had a conversation and said, you know what, we can do this, let's jump in. Since we said yes to that placement, we've had multiple placements that have been multiple children from the same family at the same time. We've also had more than one child in our care from different families. So really, it just all depends on your capacity, your time, obviously keep in mind your schedule, and really, can you be a good parent for that child? I'm confident that you can. If you've watched through this whole video, then I would have to say that you're interested in the topic. This isn't an entertainment channel per se. I mean, there will be interesting things, but it's more about education and helping people understand fostering and decide if it's something that they want to do. So if you find yourself wanting to be a foster parent, definitely click the links in the description below. I've left a few for our local area because I know I have some local fans. And then I also have some national links to help you as well. But really, the first step is to decide if it's something that you want to do, you're capable of doing, and make the call. So I appreciate you guys checking out this video. Please leave a comment if you have any questions. If there's a topic that you'd like me to cover, then definitely leave a comment about that as well. Please subscribe if you're new here, and we'll catch you in the next video.